If we were to take a woman at 40 and say, here's what's coming down the road,
Mhm.
here's what I recommend you do so that you can land at 55 and 54 where I'm at, and we both are at, living your best life,
Mhm.
what advice would you give?
So I have a little talk that I do that's like what I would tell my 35-year-old self. So roughly the same thing. Nutrition over calories. This whole cultural, I grew up with it. My whole life, I worked out to be thin and I ate to be thin. Those were my two goals because
Yeah.
thin meant healthy. Okay. Certainly being
Yeah.
thin is more healthy than being morbidly obese. My genetics was never going to allow that to happen to me. It'd be almost impossible. Okay. To be morbidly obese. So I had thin privilege for that. But I just focused on calorie counts. That's all they taught me in medical school. I knew about kwashiorkor and scurvy and severe vitamin deficiencies and stuff, but basic day-to-day nutrition, I went back to school at like 48 to learn about nutrition.
Wow.
And then incorporate that into my practice, which, then I wrote into a book. But so, really focusing on nutrition over calories. Are you getting enough fiber? So like I have a few tenets that I focus on. Foods rich in fiber also are rich in so many other things, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, so it's like you're killing multiple birds with one stone. But most women in the US are only getting about 10 grams of fiber per day. Great
Wow.
studies coming out looking at cognition and fiber intake, in elderly patients, looking at fiber intake and gut health. I mean, we all, most of us know that now. And so women should be getting minimum 25. The health benefits for at least cognition seem to max out around 32 grams per day. That's 3 times what most women are getting. So nuts, seeds, legumes, crunchy vegetables, fiber, berries, look, getting food rich in that rather than just like, oh, low cal, like how much fiber are you getting?
Yes.
How much
Right.
magnesium are you getting? What's your vitamin D level? Like
Yes.
looking at those things and the rest kind of falls into place. And then you go
Yes.
from a place of restriction to a place of, I got to eat more. Are you getting enough protein?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like I was not getting enough protein
Yeah.
for sure.
What are your recommendations on protein? Because we've had some really deep discussions
Yeah.
on this in my membership group, and people are struggling to get 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight.
So again, there's a big mental shift that has to happen. It had to happen for me. But when we look at the WHO, the Women's Health Initiative, which kind of threw out estrogen as an, optimal treatment, it's just a data set. There's really good data that came out of there. For example, they looked at fragility scores in menopausal women and protein intake. And the women who had the highest level of protein intake, about 1.4 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. So just under 1 per pound. Just looking at that, had lower fragility scores. We are not eating enough protein to counteract the sarcopenia of aging.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
upping your protein. So I'm recommending for my patients, and I do it in kilograms. I have a body scanner in my office. I measure their muscle mass. I look at their visceral fat. And, I'm really pushing closer to that 1 gram per pound, of healthy body weight.
Yeah.
And because they're usually about 50 or 60. So I'm like, don't do this tomorrow. This is a transition. Okay. So we're going to, don't think you have to fix everything today. You've been living this way. We're just going to get you, let's make our goal by the end of the year. We have a 6 months to a year. Let's get you up. And so every month you're going to try to increase here, increase there. And, protein supplements can be a great segue to get there. I always prefer you to get your protein through food. Supplements are great, but they don't replace whole food and good nutrition.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, for my patients who are transitioning to get to these higher levels, sometimes a protein shake or some of the bars can be a great way to help them until they figure out how to incorporate more of the protein rich foods in their diet.
What would you say to the vegan?
It's
do
tough.
they need to really?
It's possible, but it's tough. Right? You can be healthy without HRT for the rest of your life. It's tough. It's harder. And so, all of these are not absolutes, but if you choose to be vegan, it's definitely healthier than the Western diet. We know that.
Of course.
But you're going to struggle. It's going to be harder for you to get the recommended amount of protein to avoid the frailty as you get older. The goal is not to be thin. The goal is to stay out of a nursing home.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so that you need to say that
is what I
talk
to my patients all day long. I'm like, let's get rid of the acute problems.
Yes.
Let's get rid of the hot flashes, the night sweats, the brain fog, the things that brought you here. And then we're going to set a course for the next 30 years. Okay. Yes. And what are your goals? What does your mom look like? And look, if their mom is kicking ass at 95 and going to the grocery store and driving herself and playing with grandkids, I'm like, let's do what she does. Okay.
Yes.
But if your mom, like mine, is frail and demented at 80, I'm like, we're not going to do what she did. Let's look at what we can change, because that's your genetics.
That. Yeah. I love that. Okay. So that number one is nutrition. What, anything
movement.
else you'd say
okay.
on that?
So movement. All right. I worked out to be thin. Cardio, pick up some weights. We cannot counteract the effects of sarcopenia of aging without resistance training, most of us. Yeah. And so the majority of what I do is not focused on cardio. I do some cardio, of course. I set up I have a walking gym. My treadmill is a working desk. And so I walk while I work on an incline with my weighted vest. So I love the weighted vest as a hack. They're cheap. They have multiple sizes. You want to start with about 10%, but great studies done in the elderly of us, which is 9 years away for me, by the way. And looking at prevention, like improvement in their balance, in their strength, and in their bone density scores. Great data on weighted vests with protein intake, sometimes vibratory training. There's lots of little hacks and things that we can do, but like really focusing on strong over skinny.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Strong over skinny.
I just got a weighted vest. I just told my husband this morning, I'm like, I'm a wrecker now. And he's like, what? Like, yeah, I'm going to start wrecking. I'm like, it even has a fancy fun name.
It's a form of wrecking. I like that it distributes the weight evenly over the shoulders rather than just all on your back. And so my husband is all into it now. So we have like 6 of them. So in different levels.
How much? So I can tell you in putting my own exercise variation together that I've definitely found weightlifting to be great, but I've also found walking to be incredible, especially when my brain's on fire. So what would give us a view of what like a week would look like as far as exercise variation?
Sure. So I recommend to my patients as far as cardio goes, we want about 150 minutes a week. That seems to be kind of the tipping point. And most of that in zone 2, a little bit, do a few sprints here and there. You don't have to do much to get the VO2 max up. So like shoot for about 150 minutes a week of cardio. So that's like 5 walking sessions for 30 minutes a week, or 45 minutes if you have to crunch it down. And then 2 to 3 days of progressive load resistance training, a push day, a pull day, just making sure you're hitting everything. Don't forget about stretching and don't forget about balance. Those are the things that are going to decrease our risk of an osteoporotic fracture. And so, if that happens, go ahead.
No, and what about yoga? Because like Sarah Gottfried's
yoga,
a good
depending
friend.
on the type, stretching, balance, and if you're doing a lot of vinyasa and you're getting a lot of, you see yoga arms all the time. These women are ripped. And so again, resistant. Yoga can be fantastic for relaxation, for stress reduction. It's just, we must also push our muscles. So you have to do the more aggressive forms of yoga to get that to happen.
Okay, great. Okay, so second is movement. Mm-hmm. What's after that?
So nutrition, strong over skinny, nutrition over calories, educate yourself. Learn. Our books, there's so much great information out there, websites, whatever, and realize you don't have to accept the status quo. But if you probably don't change the habits you've got right now at 30, for most of us, this is not going to go as well as it could for you through this aging process.
Yes.
That includes menopause.
Yes.
And,
agreed.
Changing your mindset around how you look to how you feel. And so looks are important again, but it should not be the primary driver of the choices for your health.
Yeah, I continually say that I feel like I'm partnering with my 100-year-old self. Like literally every day, I'm like, what do I need to do today to make my 100-year-old self proud? And if I always keep her in mind in my day-to-day, I know I'm going to love 100 when I get there. So I like where you're going with your thought process on that. Mm-hmm. What about fasting? We have to bring fasting up.
So no, I love fasting for the anti-inflammatory benefits. Those are clear. It's very, neuroinflammation, we have great data. Systemic inflammation, we have great data. Where my patients are struggling as we're aging is protein. And so myself, I used to break my fast at noon, typically. What time is it? Yeah. And I bumped my window back about 2 hours so I can have enough time to get the protein in, and I'm not walking around all day with a chicken breast, in my hand. And so gnawing on a chicken breast. And so, I feel like I'm still getting the benefits, the anti-inflammatory benefits. The data for weight loss is not great. And again, I'm not focusing on just being thin as a measure of health, and I'm discussing that with my patients.
Right.
But I do think there's a place for it, and there's, some great data on anti-inflammatory benefits.
Yeah, and what Lisa and I discussed is what we've seen, and she's seen this, I've seen this, where something about the ketone. In fact, I keep diving into does the ketone actually activate one of the estrogen receptor sites? Because something happens when a menopausal woman has a ketone going through her body, that the brain fog's gone, the mental clarity and focus is back. And she agreed, but I said, well, where's the research on that? She goes, unfortunately, we don't have any.
We don't have it.
But have you experienced that?
For sure. I mean, in my personal life, I fast in the morning. Is after my sleep, and so I just keep going, and I am absolutely my most productive in the morning. Again, it's quieter. I'm an empty nester now. There's lots of things feeding into it, but I am doing my best work, my best writing, my best reading, researching in those fasting hours, for sure, hands down. And many of my patients say the same thing.
Yeah. So I think we can debate fasting lengths and protein, all that. And then I really lately have been we can't stop talking about the ketone for menopausal women, just a small amount, because it does seem to supercharge the brain in a really unique way. So another concept that I've been thinking a lot about is the different rhythms that women put themselves in. So one of those rhythms being the circadian rhythm. So I'll give you an example. I have a good friend who's in her early 40s. She just spent 6 months traveling from many crazy different time zones, and her whole cycle is completely off. So she meanders into her OB's office yesterday, and there's a conversation about, do we have to adapt your HRT? And one of the things I kept saying to her is, you just took yourself out of your own circadian rhythm. Bring a routine back to your circadian rhythm, and then see what's necessary in the changes of your HRT. So where does circadian rhythm fit into a woman's hormonal rhythm?
There's definitely a relation, because melanocortin, I mean, we know, and melatonin, the natural melatonin, and all of these little hormones talk to each other in the hypothalamus and the pituitary. And so we're not studying women. We're not studying female animals in the labs, because of this exact thing. All of these rhythms are disrupted as our hormone cycle change when we're pre and perimenopausal, and it makes us harder to study. So they're like, she's just a small dude with breasts. Let's just study the men. And so we need more research here. And I'm not saying that absence of evidence isn't, and I think Peter says this the best, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Yeah. I just can't go around recommending things off the bat without, God, this is something that would be fascinating to look at. Right. I definitely think there's a correlation.
Yeah.